Good afternoon, Colin, and thank you again for coming to visit us at the University of East London. I'll just run through a couple of questions and then I get your feedback
Mhm.
from it. One of the first thing that caused us in the University of East London is the impact of the increase in the interest rate. Going forward in Q1 2015, um, and the expected growth rate in the 2.41% in the CPI. What do you think will be the impact on the small and medium scale enterprises in the UK?
I think if we increase interest rates too quickly, then it'll have a severe impact on small and medium-sized companies. I think one thing we have to remember, of course, is that roughly 50% of small and medium-sized companies never take loans, so it doesn't really affect them. They'll borrow money off friends and family before they'll go to a bank. So hopefully the interest rates from friends and family are going to be quite low, if any interest rate at all. But those that have taken loans, and of course people hopefully now will want to borrow money to invest in, we would hope, going to export markets, or to invest in new jobs, or to invest in new machinery, or to new products. We don't want to put a barrier in their way, and we think that by putting up interest rates, that would put a barrier in their way of actually growing. And what we need at the moment is companies to feel confident enough to grow. I think there's two things. There's the interest rate themselves, the effect it has on the business, the fact that you have to pay more money for or a longer period for your money. And that's one thing, and that's obviously very important, but almost equally as important is the effect it has on your confidence. Because if you see rising interest rates, and interest rates go up too quickly or too fast, then the confidence that a company has to do things new, to employ more people, to invest in new goods and services, that gets hit. And so therefore, for those sort of reasons, we think that putting up interest rates, we would say, in a year's time, even could have a really poor effect on the performance of small and medium-sized companies.
Thank you. And I'll also ask you, which of the two, is it the funding for lending or the quantitative easing that we have in the UK, has been the necessary growth spot, or is it just basically just pure luck?
What, that we're coming out of recession?
Out of recession, yes.
And I think if you talk to small companies about quantitative easing, like me, they're not quite sure what that actually has done. I mean, the Bank of England will say, well, this has allowed banks to lend more. Well, actually, many small companies don't see that. I think that I have a personal theory about why we're coming out of recession. Which is that it's called the sod it theory. This has gone on for so long, sod it, I'm going to do something about it, and I'm not going to be pushed over by it. I think that, interestingly enough, many small companies, we thought there'd be far more unemployment and far more companies going bust. Small companies are incredibly resilient. It's in the DNA. I could never do it, be a small business owner in that sense. So, people are very good at surviving. They've survived by cutting back on all unnecessary expenditure. And now I think they're going, well, actually, we've survived this long. We can't just survive. We need to grow. So I think that's what's happened. I think collectively, it's about confidence. Economics is about lots and lots of things. I think one of the crucial things that's very hard for economists to measure or to understand, but I think confidence plays a huge part. If you just say, actually, I know things are not going well, I know that we're in a recession, but actually I'm going to do something about it, that's when you start to see people, and you get the sort of mass feeling of that. That's when you start to see, because then people start to trade with each other. And of course, once they start to trade with each other, then of course what happens? Well, money starts changing hands, and suddenly you're feeling richer than you were, or your company's feeling richer than you were, and therefore you go, well, I can spend some money now. I can invest in new things now.
Yeah. Still staying on the subject area of interest rate, because there's always an effect of interest rate on the housing market, on rent rising, on shelter, on transportation.
Yeah.
Do you think that the base rate of interest rate that we have at now, do you think is going to augur well for the economy going forward? And also, what do you think will be the impact on the housing market and then on
Well,
other sectors of the economy as a whole?
one of the problems, of course, about the housing market is it doesn't matter how cheap the money is, if you haven't got the supply of houses, but that will mean that people are not going to be able to invest in houses. So obviously the government have a new sort of Help to Buy schemes that's obviously had a huge effect on funding for lending for people buying houses. The real problem with the housing market, I don't think is the cost of money. And of course, one of the interesting things for those people who have already got mortgages and are already on the housing ladder, they're the ones that have really benefited, because actually the cost of their mortgages has dropped significantly and has helped people through the recession. But getting onto the housing ladder is still as difficult as possible, because there just aren't the houses there to buy. So you can have the cheapest money in the world, and it won't be the cheapest money in the world, but you can have the cheapest money in the world, but if there's nothing to buy, there's nothing to buy.
Yeah, all right, thank you. And then lastly, I was going to ask you about what available opportunities we students of University of East London can have on the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry, because I used to remember that there was a Young London Chambers that used to be before.
There's a junior. There is a junior chamber, but there isn't anything specifically for students. Something we've thought about in the past, and maybe something we ought to do in the future. The best advice is to go and start your own business, and then make so much money you join the London Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you so much for your time, Colin.
Pleasure.
And it's a pleasure being with you this evening. Thank you.